I know. Now you can hear me. Do I need to repeat all that?
Yeah, that would be good. Let's
Okay.
start over.
Call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville. City Council sitting as Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the City Council performing the housing functions of the former Victorville Redevelopment Agency. Again, at this point in time, we do have public comment. Anyone wishing to address the council at this time? All right, seeing no one, I will go ahead and turn it over to our city attorney for our closed session.
Thank you, Mayor McEachran. We have two closed session items listed on the agenda. However, we only need to go into closed session on the item number 2, which is real property negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. The parties being Mr. Metzler and representatives from Pacific Aerospace Resource Technologies. To the extent there is any reportable action, we will come out and report that at the conclusion of this closed session.
All right, and before we move into closed session, just so I put it on the record, I will not participate in that because my firm did provide insurance to Pacific Aerospace Resources and Technologies in the past year. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move into closed session. Good evening. I'd like to call back to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville, and the City Council sitting as the Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the City Council performing the housing functions of the former Victorville Redevelopment Agency. At this point in time, we'll have any announcements out of closed session.
Thank you, Mayor McEachran. The Airport Authority met under item 2 on the agenda, real estate negotiations, and at this point there is no reportable action. There was no action or no closed session with respect to item 3.
All right. Our invocation this evening will be led by Reverend Linda Randall from Emmanuel Temple, CME Church in Victorville, and Pledge of Allegiance by our Victorville Police Department Police Chief Captain Don Yoder. So if we could.
Good evening to this great community of Victorville. And before I begin this invocation, I'd just like to say that I did a study on ships that sail from good to great. And you know, the greatest ship was a little tugboat. They tugged the big ships from murky waters to calming shores. So as I pray for these council members and our mayor, just remember that they're just vessels that God used to take this city from good to great. Let us pray. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for these council members, Lord God. We ask that you crown their heads with wisdom, Lord God, knowledge and understanding, Father. Help them, Lord God, to sail this great city from the murky waters, oh God, to the great calming shores, Lord God, as they tackle the great waters of housing and commissions, Lord God, and the great housing of job deficits and city deficits, Lord God. Lord, give them wisdom, Lord God, as they lead these citizens, Lord God, and hear the prayers and the cries of these citizens, Lord God, as they bring their concerns to this council, Lord God. Give them wise counsel as only you can, Father. And we just thank you for their leadership, Lord God. We thank you, Father, for their willing to serve this community, Lord God, and to lead them from good to great, Father. We give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
All right, we do have a few presentations this evening in our Youth Advisory Committee presentation. We do have a check to the High Desert Phoenix Foundation. And Julie Norton, if I could have her come forward, and whoever's representing the Youth Advisory Committee.
Where do you want us?
Which of you would like to speak on here? Yeah.
Hi. Over this past year, we've been planning a community service project, and this year we chose the Phoenix Foundation, and so about a month ago, we put on a carnival to raise money for them, and we were able to raise $1,770. And we'd like to thank Mayor McEachern for donating $250. We're really proud.
For those of you that don't know what the Phoenix Foundation is, we are a nonprofit organization. We've been here for about 4 years, and we help families in the high desert when they've had a tragedy, a death because of an accident or a violent crime. And these gals just contacted us and had read about some of the families we helped, and they wanted to jump in and help also. And we're just blown away at how much it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Julie, if I could ask you to stay up here, I'd like to recognize our Youth Advisory Committee here today, because this is one of those things that I suggested when I came onto the council, and it just continues to grow and gets better and better, and you all continue to do such wonderful things for our community. So I do have certificates of recognition. Megan Spadafora. Yazzie Heinz. Autumn Lamb. Trinity Douglas. And I believe, would that be it? All right. I know we have two others. I would like to recognize them, Julia Estrada and also Clarissa Griego, who were not able to be here tonight, but They have all done such a wonderful job in helping support our community, so let's give them another round of applause.
Oh, I know. Yes, yeah, yeah.
All right, at this time, we'll have our city clerk present the agenda to the council.
I believe there may be a presentation by the police chief.
Oh, you're right. I apologize. I missed that. We have our captain, Don Yoder, come forward. And
Actually, Mayor and council members, I'm going to introduce you to Detective Matt Griffith, who did a fantastic job on this project, and he'll do the presentation for you. Good luck.
Thank you, Captain. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you. Good evening. I've been asked to come and brief you on an operation that we conducted late last month down in the Mojave Riverbed, which we nicknamed Operation River Walk. Back on April 26, 16 government, private, and faith-based organizations descended upon the Mojave Riverbed from D Street Bridge to the west end of the Cemex property in an effort to identify and help support the homeless population that we had noticed in the riverbed. That organization, of all the organizations comprised, we had over 40 law enforcement officers and 30 civilians help us out with that operation. This operation was brought up due to several concerns. Cemex, managers at the Cemex plant had stated to us that they had recent trespassing on their property, vandalism, and quite a few homeless population using their facilities, which quite frankly jeopardized their safety rating, and they were very concerned about this, as well as the safety of their employees. We also had received word that one of the flood control employees trying to access the riverbed was not able to in order to perform his duties, as he was surrounded by the population down there, and he became concerned. We also noticed that there was some recent criminal activity down there, including a stabbing and shooting quite recently, which was associated with a kidnapping that had occurred earlier in the year. And talking with our parole and probation department, they had also had quite a few documented parolees and probationers down in that area living as transients. Overall, we noticed that we had a transient population increase in that area. We decided that we needed to try and find out what the problem was or where these people were living. And so my partner, Detective Rodney Gardner, and I did a few things to try and identify where the people were living down there. We used the Sheriff's Department helicopter and flew over the riverbed from the D Street Bridge all the way to the west end of the complex, and noticed quite a few encampments down in that area. We also drove through the property and noticed that a lot of these encampments were combined together, so many tents combined to form kind of a little community in certain areas. And then one of the homeless people that we were talking to provided us with a map that he had obtained with highlighted sections. And he was told that these were different colored areas depending on who you were or what type of transient you were, depending on where you lived down there. So they had already segregated themselves out. few more pictures that we had taken. You can see the arrows are pointing to these encampments, which you cannot see from the freeway or from any of the other access roads unless you actually get down into those neighborhoods. And you can kind of see that they're bringing in their vehicles, and their encampments are quite complex. So traditional law enforcement action is to do a criminal sweep, saturation patrol, checkpoints, those type of operations where you throw a lot of cops at the problem and take people to jail. However, we were requested on behalf of the city manager and our captain to find an alternative plan to help solve this problem. We decided to come up with what we call an identification sweep. And we chose this for a couple different reasons. A, we needed to identify what type of homeless people we had down there and what type of services they needed. As well as talking with probation parole, we knew that they had quite a few documented people down there, and we wanted to see if anybody was in violation down there. In addition to that, we wanted to invite some of the homeless services that are in our community that do help the homeless population. We wanted to invite them to come with us and see if they can get some hands-on experience, get down into the areas where they're living and see if they can provide some solutions and services for them. We put out a call to see who wanted to come and help us, and this is who we got, quite a few agencies. Not only will you notice that we have our state parole and county probation, but we got the city animal control and several county offices, homeless services, adult protective services, and county family assistance program people to come and help us. In addition to that, quite a few private and faith-based organizations, vet hunters, who I will come back to in a few minutes, the Lord's Table, Victor Valley Rescue Mission, Catholic Charities, County Legal Services, all pitched in to help us try and find a permanent solution for the homeless problem that we had down in the Mojave Riverbed. We knew what area we had, and we had quite a few people willing to help us out. We just had to section it out. If you notice the more or less vertical line, that's the 15 freeway, and the horizontal line is the Mojave Riverbed, and we sectioned it out as you see on the map. With the intel that already was provided to us, including the flyovers and drive-throughs, we knew that a majority of our population lived in sections 1 and section 4. And so we decided to focus a majority of our personnel into those sections. Section 2 and Section 3 also had quite a few people, and we sent teams into those areas as well. We decided to break it up into kind of a two-prong approach. The first component being a law enforcement component of 6 5-man teams. Each team had a deputy sheriff, state parole, and county probation officer on the team. Their primary goal was to go down there and identify the area and make the area safe for the community service workers. We were inviting them to be with us. They were our liability, and we needed to make sure that they were going to remain safe down into this area. So since our population was more or less in our Section 1, Section 4, we sent 2 teams into each of those sections and 1 team each into Sections 2 and 3 to help identify the people that we had down there. People in Section 4 also had the additional task of handing out trespass notices for the Cemex plant, as their property encompasses everything west of the 15 freeway and south of the Mojave Riverbed. As a result of that, we ended up contacting 29 people. As our intel already showed, a majority of them lived in the Section 1 and Section 4, and a majority of our persons on parole and probation also lived in Section 1. The people in Section 4 were our basic homeless people who are down there for whatever means. They're down on their luck, economic downturn for whatever reason. They're down there and they're segregated from the other sections. You'll also notice that we have a column arrested. We did end up arresting a couple people in Section 1. Those 4 people were actually violated on parole or probation. However, one of those people was a subject that was identified in a strong-arm robbery that had occurred the previous day. So we were able to find one of our suspects in that case. You'll notice that section 2 has zeros across the board, and that is really interesting because when our team went in there, they only noticed one campsite as opposed to just a few weeks before, and that was the result of the shooting and stabbing that we had down in that area earlier in the year. So only one campsite was left, and that person who was living in that campsite was actually contacted in section 3 over by the park off of D Street. Once the area was clear and we deemed it safe, we brought in our community service people. And the homeless people were able to go in there and hand out hygiene kits and blankets, provide any information they had on available services, advise them where they were located so that they could come to them at a later time, attempt to locate and house homeless people if need be. And as I mentioned before, the law enforcement remained as a presence to make sure everything ran smoothly. As a result, we did end up arresting 5 people, as I mentioned before. However, the more important area here is that we were able to find 5 military vets, take them off the street, and get them housed. That was in cooperation with the Vet Hunters Project, who was a big part of this. But as a result of taking those 5 vets and those few arrested, we were able to see an immediate drop in the transient population in our riverbed. But more importantly, we were able to develop partnerships with these community services. Partnerships that, quite frankly, I didn't even know we had here until we started researching this project. And now that we have these contacts, we will be able to better suit our actions when it comes to the homeless population throughout the city. In the past, it's always been more or less a given that if we come across a homeless person who's causing a problem, they go to jail. It's not necessarily the solution to this problem. It's just a revolving door. We need to find a better solution. Having these partnerships developed and working with these people, we can probably find a solution for more and more of these people and try and get them off the street and sheltered and get the aid and support that they need. Again, this was a large part due to the Vet Hunters Project. Just a little bit about them. They are a active and reserve military personnel who actually volunteer their time to come out and find homeless vets. They were able to find 5 of them in our riverbed on that particular day. They have quite a few proposals that they'd like to share with you. However, the founder of that, Joe Leal, could not be here today. He's in Connecticut in what they call a homeless stand, where they provide services. They bring a whole bunch of services in for the homeless population. Quite recently, they did one in Pomona, California, where they were able to house 64 homeless people in one weekend, which I think would be a great proposal for this city to consider. Hopefully we can get him here in the near future so he can propose to you what he wants to do and hopefully take that to the next step. As a result of this population, obviously we developed the partnerships that we need and the contact information, so hopefully we can bring more or less a solution to the homeless problem that we have in the city, and instead of just taking them to jail. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I take it you have no problems identifying 100% of the people that you encountered down there?
I'm sorry?
You didn't have any problems identifying, clear identification of 100% of the people that you encountered down there?
The people that we encountered, we were able to identify, yes. We did notice there were quite a few empty campsites. Being as it is, I'm sure people saw us coming and walked out of the area. But the people that we did encounter, we were able to identify them completely through identification cards, social security numbers, and whatnot.
I'm impressed with the operation. It was
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Was there any curiosity, any effect on the river? I mean, how are those folks using the river per se?
The area is set up, it provides shelter and water for them. They use it not only to bathe or clean their clothes or whatnot, but the foliage around the area provides them shelter from the elements, and it's set up quite conveniently to Old Town, where a lot of the community services are located, so that it's easier for them to get to where they need to go to get the services and then come back into more of a secluded area.
They weren't using it for drinking water, were they?
From what I understand, yes, but I'm not too sure.
Were there any children?
None that we came across.
Are there any left?
I'm sure there are. We have not gone back down there to recount. We were only asked to move them from the one section that was CEMEX property, and we didn't physically move them. We're asking them to move to the other side. At this point, we know that there's still some people down there. We haven't gone back down there to make a count.
Do you have any plans to go back?
Yes, we do. Nothing in the works as of yet, but we plan to do some follow-up with the managers at CEMEX. My partner and I plan on going back down there, and I'd like to see us do something like this again, either on an annual or semi-annual basis.
I still see camps down there, so I think they're still there. Were any of them sex offenders?
Yes, there were.
Was there a great majority of sex offenders?
No.
Out of 100%, what would you say were sex offenders?
Out of the 29 people we contacted, I believe 7 were sex offenders.
Any violent offenders other than sex?
That I could not tell you about. We were able to contact 7 persons on parole. Talking with parole and probation today, their count right now is that they have 25 parolees in the area that are transient and on GPS.
So the ones that are down there and that they're on parole and they're not in violation of parole, if you're on parole, are you allowed to be homeless? Because I would think there would be a greater chance of them coming into our homes and harming us if they don't have the means to live.
That's something that's kind of out of my area. That'd probably be best suited by the parole department and California State Parole. From what I understand, they're allowing them to go homeless just because of the overcrowding issue in the prison system. If they do go transient, they are automatically placed on a GPS device where they can be tracked by the parole agents at any given time.
I can add a little bit of color to that, actually. Captain Yoder and I met with parole and probation prior to this operation to talk about some of the rumors that we had heard about them potentially providing maps, driving them down there, and we weren't able to really definitively say that they were or were not. They certainly denied that, but there were maps available, at least to some of the homeless people. So there was a rumor that one of those two agencies had provided a generator so that the folks that have the ankle bracelets could charge their bracelets. And we asked about that, and we're told that neither of the agencies provided a generator, but that one business in the Old Town area allowed them to charge their bracelets behind the store 2 at a time, no more than 2 at a time. And the math involved with the number of them that had the bracelets certainly might suggest that it would be very difficult for them to be able to do that because they're required to charge their bracelet twice a day, and yet they're also required to sort of stay put from dusk until dawn. So we were really a little bit unsure as to exactly what was happening. That was part of the reason for the sweep. But as far as, could you repeat the question that the the detective wasn't quite able to answer about parole? You'd asked one specific thing that I wanted to get to, and I got sidetracked there.
Well, now you got me all messed up, too. Well, my next question was going to be, were you able to figure out which were county probationers and which were parolees from the state? Because yes. I want to know if the county is dumping on us or if it's the state.
From what we gathered, we only encountered one person who was on probation, and she was violated for a probation violation. Talking with probation today, they only have 3 or 4 that are on transient status in the city of Victorville.
And do they have the bracelet?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And then going back to that map, you kind of went over it quickly, and it had different colors in the map. Were those different colors indicating that the sex offenders over here, the violent offenders over here, and the non-violent offenders over there?
More or less, yes.
That tells me that had to have come from a state or a county agency. because that's how they do it.
That's possible. I don't have any knowledge of that.
It's segregation.
That specific question was asked of those agencies. They denied it, but they had no answer as to where that map may have come from. The person, the homeless person that the deputy who was able to obtain it from indicated that it was given to him by his parole officer or probation. I think that one was parole, was the comment that was made. So that's why we were specifically asking about that.
You know, I heard you mention that you want to do it on an annual basis. I think that this would warrant you to do it a lot more than that. This is a dangerous place. And I'm wondering if maybe even signs in the river warning other people that maybe take their children or allow their children to play down there, that there could be violent criminals in that river. I think this is just something that shouldn't be ignored. And it needs to be stayed on top of, you know, daily.
Absolutely. That's what we plan on doing.
You know, we have a probation officer now currently assigned to us that works with us hand in hand. We do compliance checks, whether it's probation or parole. We're doing active compliance checks with all our probationers parole at this time. As Detective Griffith's talking, doing yearly sweeps at the location. A lot of it is going to be based on more proactive patrols down in that area versus the detectives going down there and doing this type of sweep again, really working with them. We want to bring vet hunters here to talk about what they do for the homeless and trying to get these people out of that riverbed completely. So we're hoping to get all these people placed in the next 6 months by using vet hunters, because that's what they do. They work with the homeless. They do everything they can to get them housed.
Just one last thing. You know, I work at Victor Valley Wastewater Reclamation Authority, and that's downstream. If we test to make sure that the water that we're discharging is clean and in compliance with the state. So I'm wondering, if they're using the river as a toilet, how is that affecting the testing for VVWRA? And I know that's not a question for you, but I just thought I'd throw it out there so maybe the council would, I mean, maybe the State Water Control Board or Lahontan needs to get involved in that as well. Because this is not only a safety issue, this is now a health issue for that river. Thank you.
One of the purposes of the sweep was to get a baseline. The council had requested a report, and we tried to address the rumors that we had with the agencies that are charged with tracking these former criminals, the probation and parole departments. And ultimately, there's not a whole lot of data to be had for a report. So this was sort of the baseline to see where we are right now, and we do intend to do these on a regular basis. There hasn't been a lot of discussion as to how often. I think there's still some follow-ups that we need to do, some debriefing to find out what would be the right approach to this, so that we can put together some data to give a report to the council at some point in the future. Also, just so the council is aware, St. Mary's they have a new grant opportunity that our code enforcement officers or code enforcement managers is in the process of applying for. And the intent of that grant that we're submitting would be to give code enforcement some food and housing, temporary food, temporary housing vouchers. Because a lot of times our code enforcement officers will run into a homeless person, and in certain situations, just a night or two of housing can really help them out a lot. So that's another item that we're looking at to hopefully help improve the situation. We're also going to still meet with the private and faith-based groups that the detective listed there, so that we can find out if there's even better solutions.
You guys did a great job, and I just want to thank you for that. And just again reiterate that I think we need to alert the public to make sure. I grew up playing in the river, so I want to make sure that nobody's letting their kids play in the river. So they need to be alerted of the dangers.
Chief, is this a problem that can be addressed with ordinances and prohibitions, or does that just criminalize just an undesirable behavior? I mean, have you considered those aspects of this?
You know, there are some county ordinances we looked at, and again, we served everybody notice for trespassing on the CMAX side to get them out of that area. The homeless, just know, actually, we've met several people that have been living there for years. They have families within the city of Victorville or city of Apple Valley. They just prefer to live there. They have places to go. They just don't want to go stay there.
And some portion of that population is, let's just say, homeless by choice.
Exactly. And we've met several of them that like I said, they have homes to go to. They just don't want to go there. They enjoy
Which
living
suggests it may be a problem that's just with us forever.
That's correct.
Yeah, the state also makes it difficult on some of the parolees. One specific instance that I asked the parole department about that one of the organizations had mentioned to me, I'll try to get this story correct and be as concise as possible, but essentially the gentleman had committed a crime in California in San Bernardino County. He had a home, has a home, wife and kids in Washington State. And because he committed the crime in San Bernardino County, Victorville, I believe, he was released then in Victorville, and he is not allowed to leave until he repays his debt. And yet his home and his potential for work is in Washington. So until he figures out a way to get a job as a parolee living in the riverbed in order to repay his debt, he can't get back to his own family. When I ask about that, you know, there's some potential complications there. You know, that there's a whole lot of hoops that he still needs to jump through. He could potentially end up going to Washington as a result, but he has to request a transfer, which takes months. He has to get, you know, a certification from his family that they actually want him back at the house. But it was just amazing that, you know, his real opportunity to repay his debt, his true debt to society, exists in Washington, but because he committed his crime in Victorville, he has to stay in Victorville until it's repaid, and the chances of that are slim. It was just incredible, the problems that, you know, these folks have got themselves into by committing those crimes, but the red tape that they have to get through in order to get out of it.
I remember whether it was the state or the county dumping on us.
Oh, it was, I don't want to say that they're dumping, but the parole, the way it was expressed at the council meeting, the situation that was expressed there is more likely something that involves parole. You are right that typically, well, a parolee has to have an address. If they don't have an address, if a parolee is homeless, they register at the parole office, which happens to be here in Victorville over on, I think it's Park. So that is their address. They have to stay within, I think it's 10 miles of their home address. So if your home address is, if you're homeless, your home address is the parole office, and by nature you will have to stay in the Victorville area. Some of those sex offenders, or actually all of the sex offenders, they have certain boundaries around schools and parks that they cannot enter. They have a bracelet on, and their parole officer is notified if they enter within those boundaries. So to a certain degree, some of the comments that we heard about a map being provided, there's some truth to that legitimately, because if a parolee is homeless, his parole officer may show him exactly where the areas are that he can stay and stay legal without violating one of those boundaries near a school or a park. But then they showed us that on the map, in order to get to some service that he or she may need, they can't walk a straight line because they would cross one of those boundaries, so they have to walk this, you know, jagged line all throughout Old Town in order to avoid all of those areas. And if they stop in one area for too long, then their parole officer is notified. So it's not that parole is dumping on Victorville, but the nature of the law regarding them needing to stay within so many miles of their address. If they don't have an address, their address is the parole office, and that keeps them in Victorville.
I'd like to thank our police department for an excellent report, and also for this initiative of trying to do something at the river bottom. It's as you mentioned, it's not a new problem. I've been here 36 years, and we had it even way back then, and we have done these sweeps. And as a matter of fact, with the fire department, we used to go down there and clean the underbrush and take hand crews in there. But then Fish and Game put a stop to that. When you have all that growth, of course, they can get in there and hide. So we were just trying to make it easier to locate these people. But we can do that anymore. But anyway, I think you're on the right track. These partnerships are very important, and we have to be honest. You're not going to eradicate it completely because, as Mr. Kennedy said, some of these people, it's their choice. It doesn't matter what you do for them; they're going to go back. But there is those veterans that we need to look out for and maybe get them back on their feet, and then some of the other folks that want some help deserve that. So, once again, good job.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Matt, for doing a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo those sentiments. Thank you for doing that, and I would encourage you to continue to do that. Going back generations, my family's been here for 3 of them. We didn't have these problems 3 generations ago. We did just play in the river. In the river bottom, there weren't any of these problems. And to what Councilmember Valles said, what we experience here today is not something that we experienced growing up. So we're going to have to continue to keep an eye on it, and I would encourage you to do so. So thank you. All right, now we will have the city clerk present the agenda to the council.
City Council of the City of Victorville welcomes the public's participation in tonight's meeting. It is requested that all present please silence cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices, and that personal conversations be kept to a minimum during the conduct of the meeting. Persons who wish to address the council on a specific item which appears on the agenda are requested to complete one of the white speaker cards that have been placed on the agenda table in the council chambers lobby and give it to the city clerk for the record prior to consideration of the item. The mayor will call upon each individual who has submitted a speaker card when the item comes up for discussion by the city council. The public comment period is the time and place for the general public to address the city council on any item within their jurisdiction that is not on the agenda. It is requested that a speaker card also be submitted to the city clerk for anyone who wishes to address the city council during the public comment period. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3, state law prohibits the council from addressing any issue not previously included on the agenda. The council may receive testimony and set the matter to a subsequent meeting. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes per speaker or less as deemed necessary by the mayor, depending upon the number of individuals desiring to speak. All communications are to be addressed directly to the city council. Individual comments to staff or members of the audience are not permitted. Individuals who fail to adhere to these guidelines may be asked to yield the floor. Any individual or group who engages in disruptive conduct during the meeting will be removed from the chambers by order of the mayor. Disruptive conduct includes, but is not limited to, addressing the council without being recognized, not addressing the subject before the council, repetitiously addressing the same subject, failing to relinquish the podium when requested to do so, verbal outbursts or comments from the audience. Thank you for your cooperation and adherence to these rules. All documents to be considered for approval at this meeting are before the council. The following revisions have been submitted for tonight's agenda. The staff has requested that continued public hearing items number 6 and 7 be removed from the agenda with no further action taken. Those are all the revisions I have, Mayor McEachron.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move into the public comment portion, and I do have several cards. And please forgive me if I mispronounced your name, but Brilana Smith?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Brianna Smith. I'm a citizen of Victorville, California. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Project SD, also known as Project Synthetic Drugs. I'm here to speak about a synthetic drug called Spice. Spice is a mixture of plants that are sprayed with dangerous chemicals. Spice is nothing like marijuana and isn't meant for human consumption either. But troubled youth that are on probation that get urine tested frequently are using this drug because it doesn't show up on the results. Young children are also being pressured by peers to try Spice too. It's a serious problem that these drugs can be found anywhere and bought by anyone. Many people have been physically affected by spice, and it has even resulted in death. Project SD will do everything in our power to ban the use and sales of spice. Also, people who have used these drugs have died from one-time use. Spice is sometimes called fake marijuana, but the side effects are nothing like marijuana. Spice is 50 to 500 times stronger than marijuana. People have suffered from extreme paranoia and hallucinations. I've personally witnessed someone who smoked spice, and he thought the people around him were trying to kill him. People have also had heart attacks, high blood pressure, and lung failure from smoking spice. Because of these dangerous side effects, we don't want these drugs to be sold anywhere in the high desert. Thank you, and have a wonderful night.
This next one I can't even pronounce because I'm not sure how to spell or how to say the first name, but Aguilar, Alexa. Give me I could not even read what you wrote there, so.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Alexis Aguilar. I'm from Adelanto, California. I am with the SD project, meaning synthetic drugs. Over the years, spice and bath salts have been used more and more. Bath salts and spice are easy to get anywhere, and little kids and teens have the will to live off the high. I don't want my nephews living in this generation with drugs anywhere. These people who are selling these products have other people's life in their hand and don't even see it. No. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Patricia Potter Smart.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Patricia Potter Smart, and I'm speaking on behalf and as watch coordinator for a newly formed Neighborhood Watch. Our neighborhood is a new neighborhood between Mojave and Hook, Diamond and Topaz, and there is. I'd like to bring to the attention of the council the access of the wash behind our homes. There was a fence there between two of the homes, and the fence has been removed for reasons unknown. We've established a neighborhood watch, and due to the recent burglaries whereby the suspects entered via the wash, we are asking to have the fence replaced. We also have concerns for the safety of our children who now have full access to the wash. And I brought in signatures from all of the people who attended the neighborhood watch, and I'd like to leave this with you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman Miller.
Mr. Mayor, council members, first off, I'd like to compliment Captain Yoder and his group. We had an incident a while back, and we had a quick and good response. It turned out they couldn't do any good. The guy, they lost him. They even had a helicopter on him, they lost him. So I guess those things happen, but we had a break-in the neighborhood, and we had a real quick response, and I appreciate that. One other thing I wanted to talk about is over the last few months we've been hearing about transparency, and the thing that's concerned me about this is it takes a lot of time to get these reports out from staff, and as everything, time is worth money. And I'm just wondering if there could be at least for me, if there's some way without causing too much trouble to get the time that's spent on making these reports, because a lot of them are set up just for no reason at all, or they're repetitive. And as an example, maybe is the attorney's fees. It's been over and over and over comments on this, and we even made a report on this. Well, that took staff time to do that, especially when you have to start checking with other cities and other counties or whatever. And I just think it'd be nice for us to know how much of your time is being used, because we need that time to be used for other things besides these unnecessary reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Raymond Herrera.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. Good evening, Angela and the ladies. My name's Raymond Herrera, President and founder of We the People, California's Crusader. I have two things I'd like to talk to you about today. And the first one is Cinco de Mayo. You know, the daily newspaper had a picture, a reenactment of the Battle of Puebla. You know, like the Potomac, you know, George Washington crossing the Potomac. It means nothing to the American people. Hispanics and Latinos mean nothing to the American people. They're a myth, just like their culture. Mr. Rodolfo there likes to support Latinos and Hispanics. And I got to say something to the American people. If somebody comes at you talking to you about Latino and Hispanic votes, vote American. Vote that guy out. There isn't anybody up here in the City Council that should pander to illegal aliens or Hispanics or Latinos or group with Cabriales to gain the Hispanic vote. Cinco de Mayo. I had probably 2,000 cars that drove by me in Miss Vincent in 2 hours. Guess what they were doing? They were pumping their fists like this. They were honking their horns. We had children throwing peace signs. Probably close to 2,500 Americans passed by there and were inspired by a true American that carries the American spirit forward. The Cinco de Mayo must be done away with, and the city of Victorville should never sponsor a foreign battle or a foreign culture. They're not American, and people that sponsor them are very un-American, Rodolfo. My father wouldn't stand with this man. My father wouldn't stand with anybody that talks about Hispanics or Latinos. What a crock. We're Americans. The second thing I'd like to point out to you, Mayor, City Council, and this captain over here. The homeless people out there are not there by choice, Kennedy. They're there because they're put there by the complicity of this City Council that refuses to see the immigration laws enforced. You have so many illegal aliens out there working as carpenters, working as cement masons, working in your restaurants, working at McDonald's, and you want to sit up here and dump on people that are homeless because of that. This is the end result. It's brought on here in this chamber and other chambers across this state and across this nation. Turn your eye the other way, people. Don't look at that homeless vet out there. He's out there by choice. Oh, there might be a few child molesters out there. There might be a few drug addicts out there. But most of them are Americans like myself. I'm going to tell you a little story before I sign off. You should see the house that I live in today. You should see the hat that I wear. You should see the hell that I've been through. My family was that homeless family out there, Mayor. They lived right there in Sperry Lakes. They lived at Mojave Narrows. They lived out in the open desert. They lived in driveways of abandoned houses. I took them there because people like you that wants to turn the eye the other way and not enforce the laws, not enforce the rule of law. I was a homeless man. I lost my honor, my pride, my integrity in front of my children because the body politic refused to enforce the law. This captain over here, he's a great officer, but I think you ought to refocus.
Robin Fitson.
My name's Robin Biston, and I'm also with We the People. And I was at the Cinco de Mayo Celebrate USA rally that we held in front of the city-sponsored event. And just like Mr. Herrera said, we had just extreme, excellent support from the community. We held our flags and our signs that we celebrate the USA, and we were extremely well received. And we had people join us, college students that were horrified that their campus was flying Mexican flags all over. One lady with her children had no idea what was going on. She came over to us because she says, you know, she saw the American flag, and she said, what's going on? All those Mexican flags? And we told her the city was sponsoring the event. And again, that is what we oppose. Our tax dollars being used, public works, materials, storage, just for example. A city should not sponsor in the United States a foreign country's holiday. It's outrageous, and that was our stance that day. And I just have a few photos. Some of them are of the Mexican flags, and I'm going to pass those around to the audience for anyone that's interested in looking at them. Thank you.
David Mueller.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Dave Mueller. I'm with HighDesertPolitics.org. I'd like to talk to you about, I think it was a meeting, maybe 2 meetings ago. There was a citizen in here during public comments that said that she was concerned that we were going to be using public funds to build the high-speed rail. You responded, oh, there's no public funds that are going to be used. It's only private funding. And when Fox News was here, you said that you know, you weren't really pushing for this. This is something Vegas is doing. But I distinctly remember from that meeting, I believe it was about a month ago, that you and Councilman Rothschild were in favor of it. And so this council is pushing for the high-speed rail. I'll watch the meetings at home, you know, whether I'm here or not. I do pay attention to what goes on in this chamber, and I do pay attention to the agendas. But I'd just like the public to know that you are not a fiscal conservative. Not if you're voting for this. Not any of you are fiscal conservatives if you think that this is a good deal for the taxpayers of this country. Because it's not going to create 80,000 jobs like Harry Reid said. If it creates any jobs, if it goes through, they'll all be union jobs. And that's why Harry Reid's in favor of it. And for the 4 of you, because I'm pretty sure that Angela Valles is not in favor of this, but for the 4 of you to be in favor of this because you say it's going to bring jobs, it's a travesty. And I want people to know that before this June 5th primary comes up, that you're not a fiscal conservative. That glossy flyer you mailed to my home, I tore that up and threw it away. You're just not the right man for the job. And as far as the high-speed rail, if it would create jobs, then why didn't Desert Express pay for it themselves, completely fund it? They can't fund it because it's a boondoggle. They've got to get taxpayer money. And this city repeatedly does boondoggles. Your power plants were boondoggles. SCLA, the VITA, that's a complete boondoggle. Always on the promise there's going to be jobs. You're going to get jobs out of this. That's why we need to float all these bonds. It's not what happens. They bring their own people in. People around here don't get jobs. And I just wanted to call you on that tonight. That bothered me. I wasn't here, but I heard it. And I just thought I'd come in and let you know where I stand on that. I'm one voter, but there's a lot of folks that think like I do on this issue. And you need to not be in favor of the high-speed rail. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Castudio.
Hello, I'm Josh Custodio. Previously a teacher at Silverado High School, now retired. I'm a volunteer at Westwind Sports Center. I guess I put in anywhere between 5 and 10 hours a week out there for free. try to keep the place looking clean. It's hard to do. It's getting a lot of use lately, and we're getting more people. I believe this last quarter, we actually made a little profit from what I saw. We were just supposed to try to make it revenue neutral. This particular issue that I'm bringing forth to this council is a petition that I circulated with players that go out to the West Winds facility. We're trying to remove a 20-section foot of a baseboard on the east side wall near the back of the gym because we'd like to be able to play international one-wall handball. I mean, sure, we have 5 courts in there for regular 4-wall handball, but international handball allows for an audience to watch. And so it's being considered for an Olympic event because of that fact. Handball and racquetball will never become Olympic events because there's just no available space to watch. Okay. Now, I ran into a wall with the Park and Rec, and so I circulated a petition. I got 27 signatures. This was just in 2 days. And we're getting about another 4 to 6 new players that have been using the one wall. I mean, we already have it taped off and temporarily marked off the court itself on the floor and on the wall. And we're getting quite a lot of new players in it. Most of them are what I consider at-risk youth and some at-risk young adults, which is what we really need to target. Those are not the guys that are going to be out there at the golf course playing golf. That's way too expensive for them. So I'd like to see that baseboard removed. I have offered to the supervisor of Park and Rec my personal services to remove it. Either remove it or set it up so that it can be quickly replaced and put back in there, you know, just a couple of slots, or removed and stored forever. We could always paint the baseboard facade to make it look like it's there. And these are some of the excuses that I received. First of all, the first one I got was that it was too dangerous, risk management issues, which is total nonsense. I mean, we already have indoor soccer going on in there and basketball, which is pretty dangerous. The other one was it was going to interfere with the other sports. Well, the actual petition indicates we only plan to use it for one-wall handball when there are no other activities going on in that gym. Also, the last excuse that was given to me was that it was going to create a bad appearance. Well, there's a picture that, oh, and by the way, I apologize for not having enough of these for everybody, but I did contact every council member either through Facebook or I emailed you with a link that shows this picture. Okay. The picture that's on there is superimposed. It's not really the logo of the West Winds gym, but we'd like to put one on there. So that's basically it. I'd like to offer my own personal service to get it, you know, removed. I've got the tools. I'm retired. I'm fully insured, and all I need, I guess, is a town manager really to say yes or no. And I could leave this with you, Mayor.
Please, with our city clerk.
Okay. Thank you.
Hakeem. Sorry. Jed? Sorry.
How you doing, Mr. Mayor and City Council? I just have 2 thoughts that I want to share. The first thought is this: I thought the sweep was a really good idea. Was that really the first time faith-based part of our community and county employees and city employees and city staff and citizens actually worked together? Was that the first time? I thought I heard the detective say that it was. I thought that was kind of interesting, the first time. Why have we not facilitated this in the past? This sounds like something that we should have been doing. You know, we all live here, we all have stakes, so we all want to make sure that our community is strong, not weak. So that was my first thought. And my second thought, Mr. Mayor, was, I don't know if you know this, but summer is here. And what are we going to do for our kids? You know, are we going to have are we going to let them have idle time at home while it's hot, or are we going to have a robust, aggressive recreation program for them, things for them to do? I would like to ask, what is our current recreation budget? How much are we putting in recreation? Has that been trending higher? Has that been trending lower? Has anybody looked at recreation as far as the times that certain crimes are committed and the times that we can have recreation programs that are available for our youth? In other words, target the people that are doing the crimes. Maybe they could play basketball instead of looking at breaking into somebody's car or homes or something. You know, football. Have we talked about lowering the price of some of our recreation programs? My daughter is in gymnastics, and my son played football. And I tell you, after practice, dinner and bed, and that's it. So I just wanted to get that to you guys to think about. Recreation can be a valuable tool against crime. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all the cards I have under public comment. I do have other cards for other agendas, other agenda items. So I'd like to move in to our other agenda items. We do have the Library Board of Trustees. There were no items at the time of posting. Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, again, no items at the time of posting. Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, again, no items at the time of posting. The successor agency to the redevelopment agency, there were no items at the time of posting. Joint Powers Financing Authority, no items at the time of posting.
I want my voting thing.
We have pulled, staff has pulled agenda items 6 and 7, 6 under the Victorville Water District and 7 under the Victorville City Council. So we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is the consent calendar under the Victorville City Council.
Motion by Councilmember Rothschild, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis.
Okay.
Motion carries unanimously.
Dorothy, you had requested to speak on agenda items 6 and 7. They've been pulled, so you want to wait? They've pulled them completely.
Mr. Mayor, if I could
continued them, they've pulled them.
Yeah, if I could comment on that briefly. This item was really misunderstood by the press and by the public, I think. It appeared to be an increase in rates when actually it wasn't. The rates were approved back in November of, I think, 2010. There's a schedule for them. What this was just a little bit of a adjustment to the fees for things like return checks, for just very, very small amounts, and also putting the two schedules together because we have one bill now. Because of the confusion involved there, we decided to wait until we come back to the council for a real rate discussion to combine it with that. The potential revenue from this, or the revenue loss potential, is less than $10,000 per year. So we didn't want it to become a big knockdown, drag out public issue as if it were some large rate increase. So that's why we just went ahead and pulled it, and we'll re-agendize that issue when we come back to the council for a true rate study.
Right.
Doug, just so I understand, does that mean when it comes back, we will have a rate discussion to indicate that we're not changing any rates?
If we're not changing any rates, we won't be in front of you. At some point, when the finances determine that, if we do need a rate increase, we'll come back to the council, and only at that time will we bring this other small issue at the same time.
For that matter, it could be a rate decrease. I'd be all in favor of that. All right, anyway, we'll move on to agenda item number 9. This is a request for approval or denial of a variance to the requirement to connect to the public sewer system for 12861 Maple Valley Court. Whoever makes the motion, I need be clear it's approval or denial.
What are we doing? The motion is to approve the request.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Kennedy and second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis to approve.
Mr. Mayor, it may be helpful to have our city engineer, Sean McGlade, come and give a very brief presentation to the council.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the current ordinance on sewer requires that upon the failure of a septic system, if the lot is within 200 feet of a functioning servable sewer, then they're required to connect to that. Obviously, the costs associated with that are pretty high. The council has the ability to grant a variance upon the finding that this is a hardship to the applicant. So you do have that ability, and the approval of the variance would allow them to repit as opposed to connect to sewer.
For the benefit of the council, there isn't a staff recommendation on this. These issues have come before you before, and rather than trying to take a guess at what the council's desire is, we've decided to start putting these on as sort of an option. The estimated cost to connect from the agenda item to connect to the sewer is about $23,000 based on the distance from their home to the sewer. The estimated cost to repit is $2,750. Or sorry, excuse me, there was three estimates. The lowest is actually $2,654. So we're putting this on the agenda entirely at the council's discretion as to whether you choose to grant the variance, the request for a variance.
I just want to make clear that I was told before that I had to step away and recuse myself, so I want clarification on the record.
Certainly, you do not have a financial conflict based on your position with VVWRA. If you, the only thing that would arise here is the potential of an appearance of a bias because of your position working with the VVWRA, and these are sewer-related issues. However, there'd be no financial impact on you on a decision like this. If you wanted to avoid any at all appearance of bias, and in the past you have recused yourselves on these issues, again, it's not a conflict issue, it's the appearance of bias. I don't potentially see any bias here because
I don't think it's going to make me or break me either way.
No.
Since I wasn't involved in this before, and these hardships come up, have they granted them? I mean, I feel
We've granted some.
I recall in the last year, I can remember granting 2.
That sounds about right, but I know some have been denied as well. I think it's just
and why would we deny those? I mean, this says hardship. Is it because he's unemployed or he's elderly and on a fixed income? I mean, what are we looking at here?
I think the applicant has stated his case. I don't know if the applicant is in the audience, quite frankly. But certainly the costs that he was suggesting in his letter, we have done our own cost estimate. It's somewhat less, but it's still 4 times as much as the cost to repit. So
it'd be the difference between the $22,000 to tie in and connect to the sewer and the $2,500. We should be trying to connect to the sewers because that's what our purpose is, but these times are hard and some people are having difficult times, and I think the difference is great enough for me to at least consider approval of a hardship for them.
I think his letter made his point that he's upside down on the house with his mortgage, his credit line that he had available on the house has been taken back by the bank. He didn't say he was unemployed, but my guess is this would create a financial hardship. And, I think in these times, we need to help folks in this way. It's been working for 25 years. How much harm is it? I would like everybody to be connected to the sewer. Virtually none of Apple Valley is connected to a sewer, if I'm right. Very little? Not much? A lot of people in Apple Valley are not connected to a sewer?
A lot are
Not
not
many.
connected.
Atalanto, et cetera, Hesperia. I mean, we're the only city fully sewered. It just seems that we can make room in a case like this, where this kind of a hardship.
There's a motion and a second to approve.
So by voting yes, I'm saying he doesn't have to connect to the sewer.
Correct, you'd be granting the variance.
Okay.
Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item number 10 is a request to approve the Southern California Edison Utility Agreement amendment for the La Mesa Nisqually I-15 interchange in the amount of $1,598,902.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrera, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Motion carries with Councilmember Baez voting no.
All right, agenda item number 11, this is a request to ratify a contract change order to Xenon Environmental Corporation, DBA GE Water and Process Technologies, for an additional appropriation of $22,110 for additional time required for the cleaning of the membrane bioreactors. Before I entertain a motion on this, I do have a few cards on this. Mr. Miller? Miller and then Mueller. Sorry. They are.
Anyway, I was just wanting to ask, I think I'd read where the cleaning is being done by these people because it's not really feasible for the city employees to do it, maybe because of experience in that. But my question is, are they going to learn how to do it so that we don't have to spend this kind of money again? And isn't this what the filters are supposed to do? Aren't they supposed to get plugged up? I know my filters do. In my car and my wherever. That's what the filter is there for. So isn't this this price should be expected, this cost should be expected? And why is it so much?
Mr. Mayor, if the council would like me to answer that, I can give it a shot. There's I believe, a two-step process. There's a screen that keeps large objects, large solids, out of these filters. These filters are designed to filter much smaller particles, even down to the microscopic level, and that screen failed. And we are currently have filed a claim against the company that either made or installed the screen. And because that screen failed, those solids got into those much finer particle filters and clogged them up much earlier than they should have been clogged. So these things weigh thousands of pounds, especially when full. And the reason why it's so expensive is because they were well beyond their capacity. There was no way to know for certain because it actually takes a crane to remove these filters. That's how heavy they are. So there was no way to know how much material there was in them until we got into the project. So there was an estimate originally made by the city staff and the contract staff that work on this, and ultimately the job is taking much longer than we anticipated, not being able to see the extent of that problem. These filters will need to be cleaned about every 5 years. This is happening, about a year after they were installed. So the screen material has been repaired or replaced so that it shouldn't be a problem in the future. And so we should get a full 5 years out of the filters this next time.
Will they have to be cleaned by the companies again in 5
They
years?
probably will, because the filter materials are so fragile that it's not something that city staff would undertake anyway on a regular basis. The staff at the wastewater treatment plant is actually contract staff; they're not city employees. So city staff would not normally do this, regardless of whether it was a problem.
And you're trying to get reimbursed?
Yes, we are trying to get reimbursed, and that'll be part of the claim process.
Thank you.
But Doug, the cleaning is something that's got to be done on a regular basis.
Yes, it is.
Forever.
Yes.
For any plant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
David Mueller?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name again is Dave Mueller with HighDesertPolitics.org. I did a story already on this, and I noticed that Brooke Edwards of the Daily Press did a story on this. My comments are for both item 11 and 12. What Mr. McGlade references in the staff report is that repairs were originally identified not February 7th, but this problem was identified October 18th of 2011. The staff letter says, once prison sewage was processed in September 2010, by October of 2010, 1 month later, large quantities of solids built up on the 2-millimeter screens and bypassed into the 4 membrane bioreactor tanks. The MBR membrane appears to be functioning properly after 3,000 pounds of debris was removed, but it could be damaged. Is it damaged or is it functioning? Now my point. If Victorville promised Dr. Pepper Snapple Group a wastewater plant to process bottling waste and designed it for that, why do you today think that all your subcontractors, like Lakeside, are liable for potential membrane damage if you ran prison waste through it with high solids, which plugged it up, something it wasn't designed for? Prisoners routinely flush newspaper, shanks, T-shirts, anything they can get in those toilets to get rid of it. So of course you're going to have solids building up on the screen. It wasn't designed for that. If former Victorville Public Works Director Amr Jaker said that the wastewater effluent had extremely high TDS in March of 2011, and we know the plant isn't today functioning properly, how can you explain reports that show TDS now within legal limits if you haven't been using drinking water to dilute the effluent or some other means of diluting it? I distinctly remember members of this body stating that prison flows were needed because Dr. Pepper Snapple Group did not provide the promised flows of 750,000 to 1 million gallons per day needed to dilute the flow. Now to my legal question for our legal beagle. How is it that you could be processing wastewater in 2010 from the prison when you didn't even have latent sewer ability approved by LAFCO until October of 2011? You should have even been operating that plant. And then how did that water get to VVWRA to be processed if it was a standalone plant and there's no lines connected to VVWRA? That means you either use Atalanto's lines or you use the old lines from George Air Force Base. I'd like to just say that this thing was a boondoggle, and if you read my story, which none of you will, Atalanto's building their same plant for $7 million. You spent 42 to 68, it's somewhere in there, we don't know for sure. I'd like the council to address that, why the price difference, same technology, MBR, but it's massively larger, and so is Woodard and Curran's maintenance contract. Thank you.
All right, the items before the council.
I'd just like to say that, I'm no expert at wastewater, but I do work at a plant. And it sounds to me from, what I've read in here that it is neglect on the contractor's part. Through collections, they should have been able to identify that there was a problem. And it's true about the prisons. At VVWRA, we actually get full jumpsuits, rags, you name it, that come in from the prisons. So it should be monitored regularly, and I know that the city staff doesn't have experience in wastewater, And I'm sure my general manager would be more than happy to, help with that, like, explain how to help monitor the contract staff. And it might save some money, as far as, because I really do, it really does sound like this is neglect on the contractor's part.
Yeah, it was hopefully a one-time event, and hopefully the screening material is working properly now so that the solids don't get all the way through to the MBRs. But I think I'm going to be talking with Logan tomorrow, or excuse me, Thursday.
Yeah.
So I can certainly discuss that.
Yeah,
with
I
him.
mean, we have staff that can, go over and show you what to look for, so that if it happens again, or you can find it before the damage is done. And then also, to seek reimbursement, are you looking to seek reimbursement from the contractor that's working the plant, or the contractor that supplied the filters?
There's several contractors involved. That was one of the reasons why this took some time to get put together. And actually, I would ask Sean to come down and explain who the claim is filed against, because I don't recall off the top of my head if it was the installer or the manufacturer.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Just to be clear, there's two filters. The MBRs are the fine filters, as Mr. Robertson pointed out. Before flow gets to that, there's a screen, which is a stainless steel drum with 2 millimeter holes in it to let water through and hold back debris. The flows that were used to test it initially did not have the prison flow in it, so it appeared to be working just fine. It was only after the prison flows came through that the operators noticed debris getting into the second level of microfiltration, and that's when the issue was then brought to the manufacturers of the fine screen. So it's really a claim against Lakeside, the manufacturers. We believe there was a design flaw, and that became evident by the type of repair that they had to do to stop that from happening again. There was a gap that developed between the screen and the flow, so water and debris was allowed to pass through into the next part of the process, bypassing the screen completely.
Yeah, that sounds definitely like, because like at VVWA, they have headworks, and the first part, it comes in, it's like in a huge clump.
Right.
And then it goes to the screening. So definitely a design flaw.
It is. That's our position, if we're allowed to discuss.
I'm not happy about having to continually give this money, but we're talking about water and we're talking about public safety and health. So I just want to make that clear, that it really definitely, you have some very knowledgeable people at VVWA that you can really call upon. Use them. It'll save a lot of money.
I have a question for the city attorney. It has been a widely reported fact that the city of Victorville is involved in discussions with VVWA about the future of this plant. It's been my understanding from the very beginning that Councilmember Vines was clearly in a conflict of interest position on anything that involved this plant. Has something changed?
Ms. Valles has a salaried position at the VVWRA, and as such, a salaried position does not raise to the level of being personally financially impacted by these decisions. There certainly, however, is the appearance of bias, and it's the question of bias, which is a decision ultimately for Council Member Valles whether or not she wants to participate in these discussions. But there is no financial conflict of interest based on FPPC rules at this point.
There was
dealt with this because I recused myself from a decision to award a CDBG grant to a client of mine who pays me an audit fee that is not significant to their operation and is certainly not material to my practice. Whether they paid it or not wouldn't have any effect on my income, and I walked out and couldn't vote on giving them that.
Yes, we advise all of the council members as to issues of bias and conflicts of interest, and we have done that in this case as well. It's actually up to the individual council members to decide whether or not they want to participate in the decision based on issues of bias.
There was a legal opinion rendered, was it by the FPPC or the AG?
I believe it was the FPPC that indicated that with respect to issues like this, you are a salaried employee and as such exempt from the direct financial conflicts issues that arise under the FPPC rules.
And Mr. Kennedy, in the beginning, I did recuse myself from a lot of these issues because I was waiting for that opinion to come out. But it is my choice to recuse myself on the negotiations with the City of Victorville because of my position as the Director of Finance. I don't think that I could fill both roles. So on operational issues and minor issues, I'll stay in the game. But on that, I just feel that it would be too difficult for me to fill two roles as a council person and the Director of Finance for VVWRA.
That's your call.
Okay, real quick before we go to a vote on this, I want to be clear, Sean, if I could have you come back up. There was a comment made by previous person that was up here before this council that this was an industrial wastewater treatment plant and only an industrial wastewater treatment plant. Could you clear the record on that?
The plant was designed for both domestic and industrial flows. If you can imagine, there is, if you like, a pre-treatment of industrial flows, and then it commingles with the domestic flow and goes through the final treatment. So the membrane bioreactors that are the subject of this item are filtering both the industrial and the domestic flows together. And that was always the design.
Okay. Yeah, because you took me on a tour, and there's two sides to this whole process, and it's not just one. And that's so right. I think public has this perception that we built this just for Dr. Pepper Snapple. Is that the case?
No, there were two sewer lines, actually three, but two types. One was a dedicated industrial line that would serve Dr. Pepper and any other industry that locates on the west side of SCLA. And then further, and parallel to that dedicated industrial line, there is a domestic line that would provide sewer service for SCLA and other parts of the western portion of the city of Victorville.
Right, thank you.
And where does the discharge from that plant go, the discharge that we do have?
The original plan was for irrigating the golf course and selling it to High Desert Power Project, but because we don't have the TDS down to the necessary level to be able to sell it, then any surplus is discharged to VVWRA. We have an agreement with them to that they will accept those flows at 20% of the normal treatment rate.
Thank you.
Did you understand that that means that the plant is not operating properly as it should? And that's why VVWRA had to pick up the rest so that we can get rid of the TDS?
Well, let me just say that the TDS level that we received was double what it was designed for. So while it is not discharging at the level we had expected, it's receiving TDS at twice the level that we expected. So it's operating.
By the way, to that point, I've actually had conversations with Graham Bailey, myself and Mr. Metzler, about that very issue, and quite frankly, Dr. Pepper Snapple is operating so efficiently. I mean, it's over efficient to the point that what they told us they were going to send us is not ultimately what we got. And so that's part of the reason for the TDS being as high as it is it not?
Yeah, it's a concentration issue. They are buying less water from us. They're using the same amount of chemical. They're using much less water to flush the system when they switch product, and the result is that we get a higher concentration, but the same mass, if you will, of TDS content in their effluent.
So we should be thankful that we have a company in America that's operating efficiently.
That's one perspective. Yes, we still have a a problem at the wastewater treatment plant.
I understand
with
that, but the
TDS
point is
level.
that they are operating efficiently. And by the way, just to point out something additional, everyone thinks we import from China. We are exporting product from Victorville to China from that plant, are we not?
I'm not sure I know that.
I don't know that answer either. I don't know if Keith does. You know those guys better than I do.
Are we not exporting product to China from that plant?
I don't know China specifically, but there are Asian Pacific countries that they do export to. And the reason why I got kind of off track was I was thinking about the question as to us discharging water, our water to VVWA. And Sean, I had understood that part of the reason why we're doing that was based upon it being a more cost-effective alternative than alternative methods of ridding the water that we're actually treating. So not necessarily to say that the plant isn't working. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, the other methods of disposing of that water would be percolation ponds, or there would need to be further treatment to lower the TDS, which is very expensive. So that would be the most cost-effective.
So working with VVWA in this case was the more cost-effective of a solution for the plant.
Correct.
Thank you.
But it's not a case of that plant not processing waste properly. Any plant that had that sort of an inflow is going to have the same, more or less, the same kind of outflow.
I'll put it to you
I
this
don't know
way.
if any plant is the right way to phrase it, but
There was some individuals who were looking at the Victorville 2 project, and they were asking what is the TDS level of the effluent from our plant, and they laughed when they heard how low it was, yet it's high by, other standards.
All right. Agenda item number 11 is before the council.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis. Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item number 12 is request to ratify a contract change order to Phoenix Environmental, Inc. for an additional appropriation of $92,670.82 for an additional time required for the cleaning of the membrane bioreactors. And Norm Miller? No? Okay, something.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis. Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item number 13 is request to approve an additional appropriation in the amount of $275,000 to the Engineering Department General Fund for the remainder of fiscal year 2011-2012. Also, that the City Council approve and increase estimated revenues in the amount of $162,000 to the Engineering Department General Fund for the remainder of fiscal year 2011-2012.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis, second by Councilmember Rothschild.
I have some questions on this. So we have people that are cashing out their sick leave and their vacation. Do we have policies that indicate that they can't rack up more than, let's say, 350 hours?
We do have those policies. In fact, they're, I believe, part of the annual resolution that's brought to the council by our Human Resources Department division. Unfortunately, for as long as I've been here and maybe for the history of the city, those policies have not been effectively enforced, and we are working on trying to implement that with the Unison implementation in July. However, as you can imagine, because of vacation time being an earned benefit, to force all the employees to reduce those hours during this tough budget time would be not feasible. So we do have hours that are over the limit, and we are going to work with the employees to try to get those reduced through the use of vacations and things. Most of these employees, or most of this issue, had to do with some employees who left, including one long-term employee who has a significant number of hours on the books.
I got some information that there was that employees are cashing out $60,000 to $90,000 in vacation. What is our liability in vacation and sick leave?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It should be listed in the audit. We can certainly get that to the council.
Okay, and then also I know that my concern is that if we have, first of all, is that a true statement that we have people with 600 and 700 hours on their books?
I believe that is a true statement. It's not every employee, but there are some who have got significantly greater than the policy would normally allow.
So that's a huge liability. So that liability should be weighed in determining whether we give staff raises or we absorb the RDA staff at over $1 million. So my concern is are we managing the money efficiently for the city? I mean, you have these huge liabilities that obviously are not being managed and not reduced at this time, and yet we started out the year with $30,000 in reserves, but then we gave raises to everybody, and then we absorbed the RDA staff, which all the other cities let them go at $1 million. So, I mean, can you speak to that?
Well, that liability is not a surprise. It's recorded. The expense is recorded when it's earned. The liability is recorded in the financial statements. The fact that it got paid is a result of people leaving. But the liability was no surprise to anybody.
Oh, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that if I'm the city manager and I know that I have these liabilities, I know that at any moment that they can come due. Am I going to give the staff raises when I don't have the money in the reserves? Am I going to absorb the RDA staff at over $1 million? So my comments is I don't believe that this city is being managed, fiscally responsibly when it comes to things like this. That's my comment.
Motion carries with Councilmember Valles voting no.
All right, agenda item number 14 is discussion and possible action on the City Council considering the revision of Council Policy CP-11-01 to allow for the mayor to place items on the City Council agenda without the consent of a majority of the council. This was requested at the request of Councilmember Rothschild.
I think that prerogative should go with the mayor, speed up the process just a little bit. We do have a two-tiered process from most of us, but I think whoever we designate in the mayor's seat, man or woman, ought to have that prerogative to at least the same as the staff to put an item on the agenda for us to consider. So it's just a slight amendment to our current rules to have whoever's sitting in that seat have that prerogative.
I have to respectfully disagree. I think our policy is working fine. I don't think, with one or two exceptions, I think pretty much everything that someone is asked to have agendas, we've agreed to, with a few exceptions. Have you ever wanted to put something on that you didn't get on? That we said no to?
Not that I can recall.
I wouldn't favor this, frankly.
I think we ought to leave it the way it is.
Well, my comments to Rothschild would be that you're the one who put this in process. So if you wanted it sped up, you should have never put it in process in the first place. Because before, we could just do it as we see fit and represent our constituents. So you can't, have your cake and eat it too. And the only person that ever gets denied to have things on the agenda is myself.
And that's been very rare. The attorney.
Depending who you ask.
I'll allow latitude because I don't have a card from you, but please.
Mayor and City Council, I'd just like to point out to you that we practice democracy in America. We don't change the rules to fit, somebody else's foot or whatever. I think we should all abide by the same rule. I think that if Angela proposes something on the agenda, that she should not be blackballed as it's going on. It has been going on with the City Council. But I find that I take exception when you're granted a special privilege over Angela or even over the rest of your City Council. I think that we should practice democracy together. That there's no dictatorship where the mayor or this guy or these two guys can get in cahoots with this guy and then override the will of the constituents, Mayor. I think that we should all practice democracy together. The rule fits for everybody's the same, no exception. That's my comment.
Well, since I'm the mayor, I don't think I should chime in on this. This would give me more power than I have currently, and although I'd be willing to accept that from the standpoint of being able to put things on the agenda, I do agree with Councilmember Kennedy. I think the process is working. It's not a perfect process by any means. I don't think it's ever been a perfect process. If you look at local government, state government, county government, you look at federal government, nothing's perfect by any means. And when you have the leader of the Senate, the federal level, Harry Reid, who basically prevents any bills passed in the House of Representatives from ever getting to a vote, is that democracy? I don't think it is. I think that if the people elect members to their Congress and they do the job that they're supposed to do, that the Senate has to vote on it. They're not voting on it today. They're not going to get to vote on it because one person prevents it from happening. And so as much as I appreciate Councilmember Rothschild's sentiment on the ability to get things done quicker, it could have the opposite effect in the fact that what we see going on in Washington, D.C. right now is we have Harry Reid holding up every single bill that's ever been passed by the House of Representatives over the last 2 years. So thank you, Mike. I would love it, but at the same time, I think maybe if someone else was sitting in this chair, that might become a very big problem for you. And so, it's that double-edged sword.
And that's someone being me.
I don't think it's you. I think it's anybody. And it could, you talk about it being you, it could be me. The point is that if any one person can dictate the agenda, dictate the policy, dictate what goes on, then what's the purpose of the rest of us? And I think that that's the point. And, the reason that I appreciate what Councilmember Rothschild is attempting to do by allowing us to get things through the process. I get requests on a regular basis for resolutions, for things that this body, this council approves all the time. It is not controversial. It never has been. But for whatever reason, we have to be concerned about that possibility that the person that sits in this seat, not me, the person that sits in this seat somehow is pushing something that the rest of you don't want and is shoving it down your throats. And also the possibility that I could prevent that from happening as well. That's what we have happening in the Senate and in Washington, D.C. with Harry Reid, and everyone thinks I'm in bed with him over high-speed rail. I'm not. I haven't received a dime from this guy. And yet, I have someone out here in this audience that blogs and says I am getting all kinds of money from him. I think it's so funny about that's actually happening. You can actually go on the FEC website, which if you were really knowledgeable, you would know that, and see that I have not received a dime from Harry Reid. Okay? At the end of the day, I don't think that this makes sense because of the potential, not from my perspective, Mike, but from the perspective that it may not be any of the 5 of us up here. It may be someone elected in November that becomes mayor of this city and all of a sudden decides that it's going to be their agenda. And that's the fear that I have.
Well, just because you put something on the agenda doesn't mean, it just means that you're going to discuss it, and then you vote on it as a whole body.
Right, and we have put things on the agenda that you have requested and voted on them, and you keep requesting to put them on the agenda. Do you not?
Yes, I do.
So why, at the end of the day, if we've already voted on it, does that make any sense?
I know, but some things that I can't even put on there.
It's already been on there.
What?
Put an RFP out for the city, for
It
the
was
city.
agendized, and it was a 4-to-1 vote. Why agendize it again?
We did vote on that.
We voted on it.
That's the thing. This happened. In fact, and I'll go over here to Councilmember Rothschild, who brought this up. This has come up on his behalf before. I know you brought up issues that were things that we had already voted on that you wanted to re-agendize. So it's the same thing. And I mean, this is your item, so I'm going to defer to you on this, but.
No, the idea never once supersedes the 3 votes is what gets things done. It just simply was a process to allow the mayor's seat to facilitate some late-minute entries into the agenda as a prerogative of that seat. I still believe that would be an appropriate addition to our rule set. It doesn't change that Harry Reid and the Congress there in both houses, the leadership has extraordinary rule controls over how that process is done. That's not the case with this city council or any other city council that I know of. That's all it was. It wasn't meant to be anything else. Matter of fact, it wasn't even directed specifically at you, Ryan. It was just simply a facilitator, I thought. I've sat here for many years where we didn't have to go through a 2-step process. We are now. It's a majority rule of this council is to do that, and that's fine, and I was just adding that nuance to it. And by the way, with respect to the Desert Express, it is an extraordinary project. It has nothing to do with the public funds coming out of this city or anybody else. And for all the years that I've been closely associated with that project, never received a dime from anybody anywhere up and down. Mr. Marnell's picture is on my website. He's one of the billionaire investors in the train. He's never given me a penny. Or anybody else. To the best of my knowledge, that train people, they aren't even in the city of Victorville at the moment. They're in the county. Hopefully that train station will be there with 500 jobs in maintenance yard and a receiving station. And just, so I'm on the train a bit, just to mention that.
Can we address the agenda item and then Mike will do it?
All right, anyway, all right. I withdraw.
So you're withdrawing it. Okay, then we'll move on, and Mike, you'll definitely have the opportunity to address
train
that.
and my council reports.
Agenda item number 15, discussion and possible action to direct staff to prepare a council policy prohibiting city council members from accepting campaign contributions from people or agencies conducting business with the city. This was requested at the Councilmember Vias.
Yes, I thought that there's so much talk and discussion around campaign contributions, alluding to that, you know, this is why we push these projects or we don't, because people give us money. And I thought, you know, why don't we just, you know, get rid of it, get rid of all of that, put a policy out there that we don't accept campaign contributions from businesses, so that, you know, I mean, let's just put it out there. I mean, we're talking about Desert Express. You guys say that Harry Reid didn't give you any money, but Buck Jones did, and he's pushing the Desert Express. And, you know, when you have campaign contributions from an individual that's looted millions of dollars from the city and got us involved in so many disastrous projects that has just really damaged the city of Victorville. I think that to start a new day, a fresh day, and just get out of that dark cloud so that we can regain the trust of the public, that this would be a good idea to put to implement a policy like this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we have campaign finance laws. The Supreme Court has ruled on allowable contributions. The FPPC monitors this in California. I don't see any reason to do this. I don't want to deny the right of free speech to anybody who wants to make a campaign contribution. And to say that we're not going to accept them from people who do business with the city, are we talking only about people who receive something from the city? How about everybody else that does business with the city? I can't remember if I've received, yes, I did. I received a campaign contribution from Sterling. And that's not secret. You can go to my reporting and find that. I don't know that I received any contributions from anybody else who does business with the city, but the truth is I don't know for sure. I don't know how to police that. I don't know how I'm going to know. I don't know how any of us are going to know. I'd like to know who at city staff is going to be monitoring our campaign contributions to find out if we're doing business, taking contributions from somebody who does business with the city. I don't honestly know. Anybody who's given me a contribution, I have never had one of them ask me to do anything. But I'll tell you this, there are a bunch of people who pay taxes and fees and other things to the city and come before this council every single week and demand one thing after another that we do or stop doing. So maybe those are the folks we shouldn't take contributions. I mean, where do you go with this? We got a Supreme Court decision on it. Free speech, campaign contributions are covered. This, bad idea. I'm completely against it.
You know, Mr. Kennedy, when you say that you accepted campaign contributions from Sterling, well, you weren't on city council at the time. So, you know, that's kind of different because you're not on city council at the time.
As a matter of fact, that contribution came after I was elected.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, well, and then as far as who's going to monitor it, I mean, finance can provide a vendor list in a matter of seconds off their database. So we know who we're doing business with the city. And I know the FPPC and everybody is regulating and has their rules. But I would like to go above and beyond and maybe set the example for other governing bodies, is what I'm just saying.
If I might add to the conversation, this is a very difficult issue in terms of constitutional rights and impinging on your First Amendment rights. Cities that have adopted these are very, very narrowly crafted. They have to be done by either ordinance or resolution. They're only really upheld from a constitutional challenge standpoint if it can clearly be shown, essentially, that you're doing something to avoid impropriety. For example, if there's large campaign contributions from large corporations, those types of things may withstand scrutiny. So you can certainly craft something if you want. It is likely subject to challenge based on First Amendment rights, the right to associate, the right of free speech, and you know, depending on how limited in scope it is, determines whether or not it will pass constitutional muster. Few cities have done it. A lot of cities have been challenged on it. That's why most cities don't adopt them.
And you know, there's so much discussion around the fact that, and whether it's true or not, I don't know, but like the city attorney is giving campaign contributions to certain city council members. And those are the city council members that don't want to get rid of the city attorney. So that's the problem that I'm having, and that's why I bring things like this up. And that's why I think it's important that if we want to get out of this dark cloud and start regaining trust and integrity back to government, we need to do this.
But you see what the implication is, that a $99 contribution from Andre D. Bordnowski to my campaign is the reason I'm keeping him as city attorney. No, that's just ludicrous. That's just complete nonsense. He's our city attorney because he's got a proven record. The point is that these issues have been considered and decided by higher authorities. I don't think it makes any sense to impose a rule on the council. Every one of us, I'll bet, sitting in this council, and I'm sure, Angela, you would agree with this, you have decided that there are some contributors you will not accept a contribution from. Am I right?
Yes, you're right.
I have too. And I'll bet everybody on this dais has made some of those decisions. And I don't know how long my list is, but there are a number of names on it. I just don't want money from them. I don't need it, don't want it. That's a personal decision. I don't need that input, whether they do business with the city or not. That's my personal ethical decision. And I think that's where it should stay. I've said it.
I have done the same thing about that. As a matter of fact, just to make a record clear, I will not take any contributions from Dan Tate this election cycle or any other in the future. Now, he hasn't offered me any lately, but fact is that man has done business in town recently, and he will probably do business again. He's got a business down there in the Old Town right now as we speak. He's got a vested interest in this city and a vested interest in participating in this political process. So I don't know. I personally will not take any checks from him if it's offered from him, but that's the kind of a decision that I would personally make on myself. Whether it's Cooley Construction or Wilson Engineering, or you can go through a list of 100 businesses throughout the Victor Valley that participate in school board elections, city councils, and all the other elected officials, state and federal level around here, that want to participate in that process. I wouldn't deny them that under any kind of rules or ordinances. I think the state has some perfectly legitimate and good rules in terms of this, and they monitor their political activities very well. We can get into some serious trouble, as you've seen a lot of city councils in many cities throughout the Southern California region recently do. So we've done well. I don't know of anyone on this council presently or in the past that has violated any of those type of rules. I see no reason for any kind of artificial rules like this that would limit some of our citizens from participating in here. I'll adhere to all state and federal laws that we have to in terms of our campaigning and reporting, but that's as far as I'll go. I'm not going to make any judgment on any other person, and I'm certainly not going to impinge my feelings of those participation with the local vendors and businesses within the Victor Valley.
I agree with the, we do have the federal laws and the state laws that regulate the contributions, and higher authorities have already decided what is right or what's wrong, and I don't think we need to, do anything local that might put us in jeopardy also, as Andre mentioned, through the First Amendment.
Well, I would like to bring this down to as local as possible, because this issue could go even to someone who pays a trash bill or a water bill. I mean, if you pay your bill to the city of Victorville, God forbid, you can't contribute to my campaign or to any one of us up here. But I'm going to agree with Councilman Rothschild. Dan Tate helped me get elected. I actually introduced him to Angela Valles. Everything he wrote in his letter to the...
He bought and paid for it.
Well, oh yeah, he bought and paid for it, and then the minute I became the mayor, pushed energy projects right in front of me, which every single member of this council has in front of them. And you know what I said? I said no. You know why? Because it was the very thing that he asked me not to do when I got on this council. And so I have my convictions, and I did what I felt was right. I did not push energy projects before this council. I did not push energy projects in front of my staff. And I held to my convictions, because when I was running and he supported me, that's what he expected me to do. Oh. Yeah, I bet you'll write about this. But I don't care. I did exactly what I told him I would do. And now he's
upset about it. And so I'm sorry, but when people support you to the tune of $150,000, do you think that they don't expect something from you? Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I didn't give in to that. I will not give in to that. And I believe that this policy is in direct violation of free speech, the First Amendment, and anybody that would support such a policy is against the First Amendment.
I would like to say that Dan Tate has never pushed energy projects in front of me. He has told me about energy projects that are completely free, that he doesn't make any money on or anything like that, that it would be free. So
Never free.
I've never, ever have seen him push anything. So I just want to make that clear.
I just want affirmation from the rest of the council. Did you not get the same documents that he provided to me? I provided to all of you. It's public. Anybody that wishes to request it can. I would include you. I would encourage you to request it because I was accused when I came onto the council that I was not providing the rest of this council, especially when I became mayor, with the documentation that I was getting. So when Dan Tate put this in front of me, I made sure that I provided it to the entire council. The entire council has it, therefore it's a public document. I would encourage you to request it. He is actually pushing energy projects on this council, and it's the very thing that he asked me to fight against when he helped get me elected. So I'm with Councilmember Rothschild. I will never take another dime from that man. I don't think he would ever give me another dime, but that's okay. I would never take it anyway. So it seems that we don't have any kind of motion on agenda item number 15.
Do we have a motion?
I make a motion.
I'm going to second it only so we can vote on it.
For clarification, the motion is to direct staff to prepare the council policy?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Baez, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Motion fails with Mayor McEachran, Mayor Pro Tem Cabrales, Council Members Kennedy and Rothschild voting no.
I know how you feel, Angela. I was just on the short end of a 4-1 vote just a few minutes ago. All right.
All right, council committee reports. Councilmember Rothschild?
I have no committee reports.
Okay, no report.
None.
Okay. We'll go into discussion and possible action regarding items for the upcoming city council agenda.
Oh, I do have a committee report.
Oh. Okay.
I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if it's a committee report, but it has to do with Victor Valley Transit Authority. I've been very patient on the whole billboards on the bus stops, and I understand that there's some with the staff going back and forth. I mean, this is revenues we're losing. I mean, can we get things going?
Actually, they got going today. I saw the kind of the terms of a potential deal. What we found out was there was some confusion about the ownership of those bus stops. The city maintains the bus stops, but they're carried on the books of VVTA. So then it became a question, and it, unfortunately, when those types of things come up, you have to talk about the liability if something happens, and who would then hold that liability? Would it be the owner of the bus stop, which is VVTA, or would it be the city who is maintaining it? At which point, I had a question about, okay, if VVTA owns the bus stops, why is it that the city maintains it? So I think we've worked through most of those issues with VVTA, and hopefully we'll have something in place very soon.
Like next meeting?
Probably not next meeting, no. I don't think that Mr. Kane has been sent the bones of a potential term sheet for the deal.
So a month?
A month would probably be doable.
Okay, thank you.
All right, discussion and possible action regarding upcoming city council agenda items.
I don't, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't think it needs to be agendized, but I'll just bring it up here. The West Winds handball, can we get that going? I mean, he's willing to do it for free. We don't have money in our budget for that, so.
There are some questions that I might have for Mr. Custodio. Be happy to meet with you, Josh, anytime. Just give me a call.
And then the other thing is that, as I said before, I was concerned about the fiscal responsibility in managing our budget. The mayor, you're supposed to agendize the city manager's evaluation. I was wondering when that was coming up, or if we've passed the date, or I'm not sure. I just don't want to miss a window of opportunity to correct some issues.
All right, well, that is a personnel issue, and
I'm saying it for closed session agendized.
okay. We'll make sure that we get that agendized, and I'll defer to our city attorney on that.
Yeah, I don't know what the time frame was, but when the time frame is appropriate per the terms of the contract, certainly that should be put on the agenda.
Okay, just so that I'm clear, whose responsibility is it to monitor the city manager's performance evaluation gets on closed session in a timely manner? Is it this? Is it you, or is it?
It would be contract management. That would be an issue for contract management.
Okay. So you're saying it's the city manager's job to make sure his own evaluation is on the closed
No,
session?
the city has somebody designated to ensure that all contracts are being essentially complied with.
And who is that?
I believe it's the risk manager.
That's typically the risk manager working with the personnel officer. Because this is an employment contract, I don't know that it would necessarily fall to one of those two gentlemen. Certainly, I can take a look at the contract and find out.
I'd be glad to take a look at it as well.
What the date is, yeah. The contract doesn't specify the authority that I'm aware of as far as who puts that on the agenda.
And then, I'm not sure if this is the right section, but what's going on with Walmart? I thought we were going to vote on that. And I get I'm sure everyone's getting all those emails. So can we get the show on the road, or what are we waiting on?
Right now, staff is in discussions with Walmart, and it has not been agendized yet. I would ask our development director, Mr. Bill Webb, to it's not an agenda item, I don't think, but to at least send information to the city council via email or via memo, just explaining where we are with that process and when we might see that on the agenda.
That's fine. I mean, I'm not rushing it or anything. I'm just saying that, I get accused in public of, oh, you guys are just delaying it until after the election, and then you're going to stick it to us. I mean, maybe we could get something out there that says, when is it going to be on the agenda, or what's the holdup?
Right.
Or, so I don't have to keep dealing with those hostile questions.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Ready?
None.
Just wanted to say I had a chance to go out to West Winds Activity Center last week, and I had a tour of the facility, and we should all do everything we can to keep that active and healthy. That's an excellent facility. Getting a lot of good use.
We doing council comments?
Not yet.
Oh.
Well, that was a council comment.
Do you have anything to?
Oh, to agendize. No, I'm sorry. I had to.
Well, then I won't give you an opportunity to.
I'm done with my comments. You did the train in the middle.
I know I'm not done.
Not for an upcoming city council agenda, but I do want to know, I'm getting a lot of questions about this, the discussion about the safety of children and the discussion about birth control and abortion and all those type of things that occurred at the last council meeting. We're supposed to have a separate workshop or special council meeting on that. I know theoretically that's something I could call at any time, but I just want to know from staff's perspective when we would look to do that.
I talked with Dennis today. Again, we have had a little bit of trouble scheduling it. Typically, our meetings are on Tuesday nights. Even if we have a special meeting, we tend to call them the off Tuesday because it's sort of become our norm. They have a lot of programs that they do that happen to be the first, second, and third Tuesday of the month that go into the evening. So we've had a little bit of trouble with that. I had actually looked at possibly doing it on a Wednesday, and then in discussions with the city attorney today, we do need to be careful about the perception that we are showing favoritism to either side in this issue. So I'll be back in contact with Dennis again, hopefully tomorrow, to look at a Tuesday night so that we aren't showing any preferential treatment to either side of this opinion at all. And so it has proven to be more difficult than it should have been. But as you can imagine, the potential for legal costs is tremendous. And we're trying to do everything we can to be fair to everybody involved in this issue and provide everyone an opportunity to speak at the appropriate time.
I feel compelled to make this decision suggestion since a couple of our council members have taken fairly vocal positions on this. If they want to take a vocal position, perhaps they should be in the audience rather than on the dais and speak freely at that workshop. Just a thought.
I thought the workshop was just to allow them a voice and hear it, but not get involved in any decision.
Well, I don't know. If I'm just saying, if you're both running for election, if you want to.
Yeah, I understand the concern. I would just like to clarify that when we have 150 people here with public safety concerns regarding minors, I just wanted them to have the opportunity to speak. And I mean, to have 150 people speak at 3 minutes, I mean, we would be here for weeks. But what I'm saying is that my understanding of the workshop is that they were going to come in and tell us what their concerns are, and then we walk away. I mean, and if there's something that the city attorney believes that, you know, is something that we need to address, that we have the jurisdiction to address, then we address it.
Well, and I think ultimately what that goes to is that this is more of a discussion issue, not an action issue. Right. If it becomes an action issue, then that becomes a whole different discussion as to whether.
I missed the last meeting. Get involved in social issues now, or regulating?
At the last meeting, we had approximately 150 people here who were voicing strong opinion, or at least their appointed leader, Dennis, with Moses House, was giving a strong opinion about the potential for Planned Parenthood coming to Victorville. And there was a discussion kind of back and forth between members of the City Council and Dennis. And ultimately, I suggested, somewhat innocently, I thought, that if we scheduled it for a workshop on an off-council meeting night, so we didn't go until midnight, and still try to conduct business during, after a 3 or 4 hour public comment period, that might be appropriate. We can invite, Planned Parenthood, we can invite Moses House, we can tell everybody, hey, we're going to talk about these issues, whatever you choose to call them, and we're just going to listen, or you're just going to listen. And I would be here too, I guess. But anyway, apparently just the concept of scheduling it as a special workshop meeting, even if it is only for public comment, preferably on that issue, even though public comment can be on any issue, that could show, and the courts have decided, and I don't want to speak for Andre, but this is a discussion he and I had, the courts have decided that could or has created a bias against the Planned Parenthood organization. And so to avoid that, it wasn't the intent of the workshop, it was just simply to separate that community discussion from the general business of the council, but we don't want to risk any kind of a lawsuit. We want to allow everyone to have a voice on this, as you've all said. And so we had to take a step back and look at trying to find some way to keep it the same night as the council meeting so that we aren't showing any preferential treatment for anybody, but still get through the business of the city at some point afterwards.
I think it's important. We should be honest. I mean, that discussion that we had, very brief, covered safety issues for children. I agree. It enlarged. There's no way in the world those 150 people would have been here if Planned Parenthood was not attempting to open a facility. They weren't here just because 150 people suddenly were anxious to talk about children's safety. So it's a Planned Parenthood issue. And if that's what the discussion, well,
And I'm going to disagree with you, because if you wanted to open up an abortion clinic, I would be against it. So what I'm saying is that I'm against them doing abortions. If we can condition them to not perform abortions, then I'll step back.
That issue at this point is not
I'll
even...
step back.
That issue...
But at the end of the day, if anybody wanted to open up a clinic to perform abortions, I'd be against it.
None of those issues are before the council at this point. My concern is that at some point, issues about site plan modification, which is what Planned Parenthood is seeking at this point, which is down at a zoning administrator level and has not been decided yet, may come to this body through an appeal process. It may or may not. Don't know at this point. The bottom line is that any person subject to that type of quasi-judicial hearing is entitled to a fair due process situation where they do not have to experience bias on the part of the decision-making body. To give them anything but that could create liability for the city. So I would advise you at this point, the only thing that should be occurring, because there's, again, no matter before the council at this point, is just to listen to public comment on these issues and not to provide either side with any preferential opportunity to do that.
All right, then we won't have a special meeting or a workshop.
The only thing you should do is if there is a concern that it's going to conflict with the regular business of the city, then perhaps you could schedule a little bit earlier to have public comment, perhaps at the 5 o'clock meeting.
All right. That was the only reason for my question, but apparently it's not appropriate, so we'll just wait until such a time as and such an item is before us?
Again, I would encourage that it just be, scheduled time when all the council is available to hear public comment from both sides. If there's no action to be taken, there's no agenda item at this point, and, making your opinions known and presenting a bias is going to influence the ability for an applicant to have a due process.
Well, hasn't that ship sailed?
Not yet. There's been no decision with the city yet at all.
But
at this point,
there's been bias shown.
Only at 2 council people, and I suspect that if the appellate process occurs, they will raise that issue.
Is there a project in place right now for
No, there's not.
clinical facility?
No, there's no project in place. I believe Planned Parenthood may have had a pre-submittal meeting, but they have not filed any paperwork at all with the city at this point.
There'll be a process when there'll be a process when there's an application for whoever wants to.
Mr. Webb can bring us all up to speed on.
I do want to make sure the record's correct. As last we spoke, you're correct. However, my understanding is that they did submit the application today, and the application is just for exterior alterations, which is the modification of the building. That's a site plan modification. It does not require a public hearing. It is on an existing site, so it goes to the zoning administrator. There is no discretion. It is not a discretionary issue. He has no discretion over it other than the exterior modifications. If they meet the code, that will be approved, at which time his decision can be appealed to the Planning Commission, and their decision, as always, can then be appealed to the council. However, it is on a site plan modification only. The use is a permitted use. Medical facilities are allowed throughout the entire city in that zone. They include operations and surgery.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. And the council was made aware, in fact, Dennis Morris from Moses House, he mentioned at the meeting and then when we spoke again today that he understands that this is a permitted use legally and that the city cannot deny the use. Certainly the work of the zoning administrator will consider the exterior modifications that they request. But as far as the medical use in that area, it is a permitted use, and they fully understand that.
All right. We'll now move on to reports from staff and then council members. Doug?
The only report I have is I would invite anybody who hasn't signed up yet to sign up for the Stride Ride and Glide at SCLA. It's this Saturday. I got my bike tuned up a little bit this weekend, and I've tried to catch up on my training a little bit. Keith was talking about riding his bike, but he doesn't have a helmet yet, so we'll have to fix that. I know Rudy was talking about riding his bike. The event is a Chamber of Commerce event that the city is assisting with, helping with the setup of the cones to make the riding and the running area safe. If you are interested, it's either a 5K or a 10K run or walk. There's 2 bike ride, not a race, but a ride opportunities. A 9-mile ride that is relatively flat, I'm told, and then a 25-mile ride that is not relatively flat. It actually goes up what I call the big hill, up Air Expressway from Victorville proper all the way up that big hill. So you better have some legs if you're going to ride in the 25-miler. It ultimately ends up going all the way out to Maverick Stadium and then back to SCLA. So all the events take place this coming Saturday morning. You can sign up at active.com.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Rothschild because I know he's itching to talk about Desert Express.
Just a couple of brief comments. One, the boondoggle at SCLA, the base out there, is making in excess of $2 million a year going forward and growing as we sit here now. Our standalone electrical utility is making $1 million plus and growing as we going forward. And with respect to the train, according to Husing, 3 years program, they'll be employing about 50,000 man-hours, and that's not including the permanent employment at the train station, both in Vegas and the one in California. California will be the biggest benefactor of the train. And again, we've got the dedicated E220, which is the freeway that isn't been built yet, but certainly dedicated both state and federal from here to Palmdale. We get that 5-year construction plan on for the Desert Express to hit Palmdale, and you've got 2 nexus points for the greater Los Angeles area to market coming out here to hit the train and then going on to Vegas. That is a major employment boon to Southern California in both Victorville and the Antelope Valley area. So you should be excited about the train. It's been 7 years in the process. They've got everything done now except for the final Federal Rail Authority loan that they do have to put equity into the bank on. It's not Solyndra. It is an equity loan from the Federal Rail Authority. It's not coming out of the federal budget per se. It's coming out of whatever projects they've had here for many years. And this is teed up as project number 1 in the whole country. It's been a long process, but it is now finally coming to fruition. I'm excited about it. I think they'll do a ceremonial shovel in the ground probably just before the November election, so Mr. Obama could come and show up in Las Vegas with his foot on the shovel and claim he created 50,000 jobs. Quite frankly, I'd like Mr. Romney to come to Victorville and put his foot on the shovel the same day and make the same claim. But nevertheless, that's my dream for the ceremony for the shovel in the ground near the end of the year here. Thank you.
You said it.
I made my point.
Oh, that's right. You did. You did. Angela.
You know, I feel like I have to issue the public a warning to not believe everything he says, Rothschild. Other than that, I am concerned about the recreation budget. Just like we allocated an additional $150,000 to adult golf, I think we need to start paying attention, and it's true. We need to get these kids busy, and we need to start prioritizing, and instead of, wasting funds, we need to start paying attention to the children here and get them active.
Mr. Mayor, I don't normally comment, but just in case you've forgotten, Councilmember Valles, that agenda item that appropriated the dollars to golf also appropriated additional dollars to recreation so that we could keep the pool open this coming summer.
But there was $150 to golf, and how much to the pool?
There was $40,000, I believe, to the pool. That was the amount that it took to open it up.
Well, I think that it should have been reversed. $150,000 to children's sports, whether it's the pool, and then $40,000 to golf.
Understood. That'll, I'm sure, be a topic of discussion as we get into our budget hearings probably next month.
My turn. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the citizens that attended our Cinco de Mayo celebration. We had, according to the college, the campus police, we had over 13,000 people, in spite of a feeble attempt to protest on the streets by a handful of people. But I would like to thank the community that supports this. It was a cross-section of this community that attended that family festival. I would like to especially thank our public safety, the highway patrol, AMR was there, police and fire. And the American flag is the only one I recognize was up flying from one of the aerials up there. So I appreciate that, Chief. Thank you very much.
Well, to the recreational programs, my son is playing t-ball right now, so I'm having the opportunity to experience what Victorville is doing for our residents, and I think it's a great thing. It's amazing the numbers of kids we have out there, both boys and girls playing t-ball. They practice on Monday nights. They have their games on Saturday mornings, and running a campaign and being involved in that is a little difficult, but I do try to make it to both. But I want to commend the city staff and all those that are involved with the recreational department and what they're doing, because it means a tremendous amount, not just to me and my family and my son who's playing t-ball, but I see it with other parents and their children as well. There was a comment made earlier and about Washington crossing the Potomac. And it reminds me of the fact that we are even able to be here tonight. Washington crossed the Potomac for our very freedom. So to say that that didn't mean anything to the history of this nation and to the freedom of this nation, and the freedom of its citizens, whether they be white, black, Hispanic, Chinese, doesn't matter. I think Washington crossing the Potomac was a huge issue and a huge a thing for the freedom of our nation. And so I don't think comparing that to Cinco de Mayo makes any sense. I don't know if that's what you intended to do, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the record that George Washington crossing the Potomac was what created the very freedom that we have to be able to meet like we are here tonight. And so I'm very glad that he did it. And, from my perspective, that's the reason we have the freedom that we do today. So,
let's get our history straight. Washington crossed the Delaware, not the Potomac. He did it on Christmas Eve. You don't remember the year, 1777?
Yeah, that's right. Were you there? Were you there? Okay. He's old. All right. Well, all right.
With nothing else, we're adjourned.